Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the BlackGirlOption podcast. My name is Kayla Salem, and I'm your host. With each and every episode of the BlackGirlOption podcast, you all will be listening to me learn and discover new lessons on my path to being a consistently profitable trader. So thank you all for tuning in and enjoy the show. Alrighty. Hello, Jared. Welcome to the BlackGirlOption podcast.
Thanks, Kayla. Good to meet you. Good to see you.
So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit and talk with me and sort of help my listeners with some of the things that they may be struggling with. So to start this podcast off, I want my listeners to know a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What are your hobbies? Things like that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Connecticut, kind of a rural part of the state. Now I live in kind of the northern Philadelphia suburbs. My wife was from this area, and it's more my speed, right? I've lived in cities around the country.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in New York and Boston and Arizona, Phoenix, and Portland, Oregon. But this is my speed. I mean, I think for where I'm at in my life with a 7-year-old daughter and responsibilities, it works out well. So I get to work out of my house. And anything I need is in, 10 minutes away. So, as far as hobbies go, in a non-pandemic world, I was playing a lot more tennis, but also playing golf. I like to run. I've had kind of a nagging knee injury, but, kind of big into fitness and working out, personal health and those sorts of things. As far as like winter hobbies, last couple of years I've been doing puzzles, which has been fun. I used to do it as a kid, and yeah, it's actually been kind of I took on a 2,000-piece puzzle last winter, which was, sort of a big undertaking, right? But it's obviously fun. But for me, it actually became kind of insightful in terms of like how to work on projects. And that was kind of one of my things that I typically struggle with is, I'm great in sort of the short-term things, but, writing a book or taking on big projects with work, it's oftentimes kind of hard to
fit it in,
really understand what that process looks like. And ironically, doing a 2,000-piece puzzle was
a big project.
Was actually somewhat insightful. Yeah, because you have to, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? You're kind of dealing with all these pieces that you don't really know exactly where they go, and there's kind of the organization that you have to go through to be more efficient. And but then there's like kind of the challenge of seeing how they fit together, and that kind of creative process is something I really enjoy as well. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, I built my daughter a castle in the basement.
Oh.
Not really kind of woodworky, but I'm handy enough and kind of can just make things up. And so it came out pretty good. So, it's just like stuff like that I like to do.
Yeah, like
kind
problem solving, kind of, brain puzzle kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. That's that. Yeah, well said.
How long did it take you to finish it? You mind me asking?
well, the actual construction of it took about 3 months. But then I sort of assumed that I was going to get some help with the design and paint and all that sort of stuff. But no, so that was all me. So it actually took I didn't really, it sort of just sat kind of unfinished for about 6 months. And, my daughter didn't have any friends over at that time because we were still pretty conservative.
Yeah.
Then it was probably about a year before, it was kind of ready
to be used.
Show the world, the creation. But it's cool. It's fun.
And how long did it take you to finish the puzzle?
It took about 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like December through January.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy. I mean, I probably worked on it more than I should have, but
it was fun. I bet, right?
It was. Yeah. It's to me, I find that relaxing. My wife was like, "How you can do that?" At the end of the day, it was like, no. It actually kind of just like allowed my mind to settle. I could focus on something else that was active but creative. I mean, I have a hard time just sitting still. So.
Yeah, there's this app that I play. It's called Two Dots, where essentially you're just like making squares to like clear the board. And I've been playing that game for like 3 years, and it's just sort of this like mind game where you just have to figure out how to clear this board in a certain way. And are
you drawing lines between the dots?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's funny. I played that as a kid, and we used to make, usually you'd play like on like a 10 by 10 square, something reasonable. Mm-hmm. But I made one that was like, an 8.5 by 11 sheet.
Yeah.
And we'd make photocopies and play over like a week. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's my sort of little brain teaser. I play it probably every day. I'm on like level like 3,700 at this point.
Oh my God.
It's been an obsession.
That's awesome.
Oh,
But it's good for pattern recognition, right? I mean, it is, as far as like, being involved in the markets, like that sort of stuff is key.
yeah.
And for me, I mean, pattern recognition is an important part of what I do.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, you're a licensed mental health counselor. What made you want to get a degree in counseling, and what made you want to go in that field?
Necessity. I never intended to go into it, and I actually wouldn't even consider myself to be in it, truthfully. Like I've learned the skills of a therapist and have then kind of integrated that into my own program to help originally golfers, right? And so I wanted the help for myself because I was choking when I tried to play or tried to qualify for the U.S. Open, and that was back in 1997. I was, right after my freshman year of college. And yeah, that just kind of kept happening, and sports psychology was helpful. I kind of dove into it. Golf psychology was helpful, but only to a point, right? I kept kind of struggling under the most intense pressure. I was still a 3-time All-American, won 9 tournaments in college, Division III, but I mean, it's still something.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to play professionally, but like I knew that I wasn't going to just try it, given that I was struggling to keep myself together under the bright lights. And so I sort of saw, and I should say that, sports psychology did help, right? It helped in general, but not in those key moments. And so to me, it was just like, here's the problem, right? Like, why am I able to do it in these spots and not others? And to me, it sort of showed the weakness of sports psychology, golf psychology, and that I kind of reasoned that the skills of a therapist would be sort of the antidote to that problem. And if I was able to solve that problem, I would have still a chance to become a professional golfer, or I would have a career, because there's probably other people like me who, don't kind of have the natural talents. They have issues that have to get worked out,
Right.
Big or small.
Yeah.
And if they're holding them back, then that's a problem. So that was really the desire to get that credentialing, but it was really just the experience and the training, needed to be able to fill that gap.
That's interesting. You went towards the psychology aspect, because most people, especially like in sports, if they're struggling in sports, they're going to go more towards the athletic training. They're going to be like, okay, I need to get my body more fit. I need to practice more. I need to do sort of the more physical, quote unquote, aspect of it, as opposed to, I need to sit down and really look at myself and how I see things and how I think things. What made you go that route? Like, instead of just, running more and lifting weights more or whatever. I don't know how golfers train.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, going out to the driving range and hitting just a ton of putts and hitting a ton of balls, and then going to the putting green, that kind of heavy practice. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I had always kind of be someone that was a little bit, lack of a better term, kind of full of shit. And here I was kind of running up against a spot where to me, I just couldn't escape the truth, which was, it wasn't my swing, because I knew how good I was. I knew what I could do under normal circumstances. I knew what I could do in even competitive circumstances that were of less pressure. It was my inability to handle the pressure. And so that, I actually early in my golf coaching career struggled, because it was hard to get players to understand that, no, you can't kind of outrun these issues. You can't outwork them, that you have to address them directly. And a lot of golfers wanted to just buy clubs. They wanted to go to the driving range. They wanted to go, they wanted to do other things other than look at, kind of their issues. And I think for a lot of people, it feels very personal. It feels very threatening to like look at yourself in that way, but it actually doesn't have to be at all. Right? I think there's a lot of societal mythology that says that, if you have psychological weakness, that means that there's something wrong with you. And it truly is no different than there being something wrong with your body, right? You would never feel bad about yourself because you had an ankle injury. Right. So why would you feel bad about yourself because you're feeling anxiety or you're getting angry in these spots? There's a cause, and that cause is not you. It's something that you either fail to understand, or something that you believe that is flawed, or a misperception that you have about your own emotions, right? or about the learning process. I mean, one of the most basic causes, and actually this was a big thing for me, of why I struggled, was that I actually just completely misperceived what my body was telling me when I was under stress, right? The anxiety and the nerves, my heart pumping out of my chest. I assumed that there was something wrong.
Yeah.
Not that I knew that this situation made sense why I felt that way, but it felt wrong for me to feel that intense. But, when you look at it more closely and look at the reality that every professional athlete under, environments like that, and truly a lot of traders in those, you have to feel that.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling that, that's the problem. So when you start to kind of recontextualize the experience of being under pressure and understand that, that sensation draws your attention inward, you pay more attention to your body, how you feel. But that is no different than any other distraction. Like if I had you focus on how your feet feel on the ground right now, paying attention really to how your feet feel. And you have to continue to listen to me talk while you're focusing on your feet, right? You feel this sort of
disconnect
conflict between those two kind of points of attention. So if I'm focused on how the pressure is making my body feel, I'm not focused on the shot, not focused on the read that I'm going to make on the lie and how the wind is. And I'm not kind of tuned into what's going on around me, much like you're not tuned into the market when you're focused more on your own stress. So that's like kind of the most basic example of like a misperception. And, when you look at it from that lens, like it's not you, you're not the problem. They're just things that you understand that are wrong, which is no different than, having some poor technique in terms of how you're lifting weights or how you're actually using some of the tools in trading, right? Those are easily things that can easily be fixed, right? But if you kind of depersonalize and make it not about you, then it's just certainly a lot easier to progress.
I love that because I relate so much to it. I'm sort of still in the beginning phases of understanding sort of my emotions while I trade. And how because I love that you said that in your book about you were read the page and then now focus on your feet and see now that you're continuing to read, you're kind of missing what I'm saying, but because you're so focused on your feet. And that's the same thing with trading. You're so focused on how you're feeling. Oh my gosh, I'm anxious. I'm in this trade. You're not really understanding the market context and what your original trade plan was. I've done that so many times where I enter a trade and I'm like, okay, this is a perfect trade for me. It's like, it's exactly to my plan, but I enter it and I kind of, have a few ticks that go against me. And then my heart starts pounding and my heart starts beating and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose money. And then like, I'm not focused on I expected this. Like I wanted this. I expected this. I planned for it. And there's a sort of disconnect with my feelings and my body and my actual plan originally. But we'll get into that a little later on in the interview. But so you realized you had sort of a pressure issue and you wanted to address that. And so you go to school, you get your counseling degree, you become sort of a mental health counselor. Would you say that mental health counseling and performance coaching are similar, or are they two different disciplines altogether?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different disciplines. I think there's obviously an overlap, kind of can take the Venn diagram and say, here's where one begins and here's where the other ends. And there is some overlap. I would say that the mental health side is personal issues. These are concerns that you have that exist in every aspect of your life. Some of them, originated in childhood. Some of them are kind of present day, or the performance side is really, let's break down and analyze, the reactions that you're having in real time and understand what's causing them. And I'd say 90% of my work, maybe even 95% of my work is focused on just those performance issues. And the way that I work with somebody is very active. I'm not just like kind of asking you, a litany of questions and just like letting you kind of figure it all out, which can tend to happen with therapy and mental health counseling. It is coaching, right? We are in the trenches together, trying to work through the problem, devise a strategy that you can then deploy that strategy, come back, tell me what you found. Here's where it worked. Here's where it didn't work. Here's what you're now seeing. We analyze that again and, dig in, devise another strategy, and just kind of keep reiterating. Occasionally, right, we start to see that the progression sort of stops and let's take the fear or the anger, maybe the big thing. And we've devised a strategy, it's not working. And a couple sessions, right, we'll kind of start to figure out like, okay, well, maybe this actually does have some personal roots to it. And so because I've got the mental health counseling background, I can explore those topics with somebody. And if it's severe enough, then obviously send them out to, a therapist who is specialized in that. Mm-hmm. But if it's sort of more of the like worried well, kind of spectrum, like somebody that wouldn't go to therapy for this issue, it's not affecting their personal life. It's only just coming out and trading or coming out in golf.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes there are the intensity of these performance environments is so high that it just exposes weaknesses in yourself that, sometimes can be personal. So that's not occurring elsewhere in your life. Well, that stuff we can work through. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of risk on my end to kind of address those problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I used to tell my followers, like, who needs therapy when you can just trade in the stock market? But now, like, I feel that if you're going to trade in the stock market, you're most likely going to need therapy. Like they're not two either or. It's something that should go together, my personal opinion. So you go from golfing to mental health counseling to performance coaching to writing a book about poker and the mental game of poker. So how did that come about?
So I as soon as I got my license, so I 2 years to get a counseling psychology degree, a master's degree, 2 years to get licensed as a therapist. A month after I get my license, I quit my job. I fly to Arizona and begin building up my golf practice, and did that for a couple of years and worked with some good juniors and some PGA Tour players and some actually one gal that won on the LPGA Tour. So I was building up a decent roster, but it was just hard to build some traction. I was not as good as I thought I was at the time. I also realized that, again, my expectations about golfers was just off, right? They weren't willing to put the work in. Mm-hmm. And then I met a poker player who used to be a professional golfer. And he basically, was having incredible success in poker, but was having major tilt issues, right? Major anger issues mm-hmm. where, the luck in the short term was just driving him mad. I mean, he's a better player. He should be winning more often. And when he was getting kind of unlucky, he was quite literally like smashing his mouse into his monitor, ripping out his desktop and throwing it in the corner. And so he and I worked together for about 4 months. Prior, he was making about $20,000 to $30,000 a month on PokerStars. In the 4 months after he and I started working, he made $600K. So decent return.
Yeah.
And he was also coaching on this sort of online training website called Stocks Poker, who ironically was founded, like the name came from a guy who used to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, quit his job, started playing poker, and then started teaching people. So he kind of created this website. They invited me to start creating some video content for them, and building up this sort of community of poker players. And the need was so great. But the good thing about poker for me compared to golf was that you couldn't just go buy clubs. You couldn't convince yourself, like there was nowhere to hide. And
you're just sitting at a table. It's not a physical activity. You're just sitting at a table using your mind.
It's your brain, right? I mean, of course you can be fit mm-hmm. and get, have yourself overall be healthier, but that's not going to help you manage your anger better.
Right.
And the other thing is that you have, kind of amateur players, people that play on the sides, kind of like a lot of traders are, they're not full time. Mm-hmm. There's a built-in financial incentive for them to say, okay, I'm willing to pay your hourly fee because I can get X return on it. Mm-hmm. For the average golfer who needs my work, it's like, well, okay, so I'm going to maybe beat my friends or maybe I'll do better in the club championship. It was just like not really, the motivators were not quite as clear for them. Mm-hmm. And so, built up a roster very, very quickly. And I sort of get to a point where I get bored and tired of saying the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like, okay, well, I could make a video, or I could write a book. And, I never really kind of had like a desire to write.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I grew up, not very well, not doing very well in school with regards to like English. I was great in math and great in science and social studies, but English and reading were not my strong suit. So never would have thought that I would have written a book, but I saw it a bit as a kind of a business opportunity.
Yeah.
I self-published,
Wow.
all 3 of the books. And I did so because why would I give the publishers, a majority of the profit
when they did nothing?
Yeah, exactly. Especially in a niche like poker. It's like, well, what are they going to offer me that I can? I mean, I calculated my break even at selling 1,300 books, and I did that in 2.5 months.
Wow.
And at that point, then it's just, just
Profit
there.
from
So,
there.
yeah, exactly. Just kind of, and also, something that can kind of get my name out there, etc. So, wrote that book in 2011. Took about 2 years to do.
And so how was it received from poker players that you would coach?
Yeah, they loved it. I mean, I think it certainly people that had worked with me recognized that it was more systematized. It was sort of easier to, when we work together on one-on-one basis, it's kind of very tailored to them, but sometimes there were issues that they didn't even know were issues until they read in the book. And we're like, oh, okay. But then others that hadn't worked with me, for me, the biggest, kind of vote of confidence is if you can solve your problems on your own using the material in the book, well, then I've done my job.
Right.
And that kind of feedback was really, really strong. And it's been selling incredibly well for a decade. In some ways, it feels like trading in the zone is to trading.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of become kind of the standard. And originally, it was about 2 years after I wrote that book that traders started picking it up, right? Because a lot of traders play poker and sort of just naturally kind of started to bleed in there. And, they described it as if you just change the word poker to trading, well, it all applies. And some suggest that I actually do that, but I was not really kind of that ilk to just. So I started writing the trading book in 2018. So it took me about 3 years to do it.
That was actually going to be my next question. Like, how did traders sort of find out about you? But I guess that's how they found out about you, is the book. And you. Yeah,
and exactly. So I started coaching them around that time, and then got some institutional gigs where I was kind of going on site and working. So I got kind of both sides of it, where I was getting kind of the retail individual investor, but also or trader, but then also the institutional side, and sort of seeing the differences and the similarities. I mean, I think, your listeners will be comforted by the fact that they have issues too, right? And they have the same issues. They are on average less in severity, but part of the reason for that is because there are a lot of gatekeepers. And you can't just say like, oh, I've got, $50K, I'm going to load it into my brokerage account and off we go, right? There's no barriers to entry for trading, which is super cool.
Great.
But when you look at what institutions, provide, like that's not enough. It very much is like, kind of getting drafted into the professional ranks of a sport, and you're able to get there because you have a skill set that they either believe they can mold or that already exists. And a lot of that includes, not having, kind of major reactions, major emotional reactions. So, but at the end of the day, right, everybody's human. And so the issues that are experienced are the same. They just tend to be a little bit less severe.
So with all the clients that you've had in terms of the traders, what would you consider to be the leading obstacle for struggling traders in terms of greed, anger, or tilt, as you call it, confidence issues, fear? What would you say is the leading obstacle for them?
Well, the good news is I can say this not just based on my opinion now, but actually by some research. So I actually just released this past week a trading survey, and we got over 1,200 responses from traders around the world. And actually, the effect that I'm going to describe held up across gender, across age, across, kind of geography. But the most, the one that was cited as being, kind of the biggest issue for people was fear. It was 44% ranked at number one issue. And I think that kind of connects back to the conversation we were having earlier. And my sort of hypothesis is that, a lot of traders are not prepared to accept the intensity, the inherent natural intensity of trading. It is like being on the PGA Tour. It is like being a professional athlete competing at the highest levels. If you are not feeling pressure in those situations, you are doing something wrong. And especially for new and aspiring traders, right, getting yourself acclimated to that, right, conditioning yourself, right, to be able to understand what your strategy is and hold it in mind and not be distracted internally. At a very basic level is like kind of the first skill to develop. Now, yes, there may be emotional issues that are coming in behind them. There may be bigger fears of failure or making mistakes or losing capital that can kind of amplify that initial fear. But we don't know early on what is what, right? And I think a lot of times there's an overestimation or a lack of appreciation for that basic level of pressure that is just inherent. So you got to embrace it. You got to understand it's part of the game. And then that will help to reduce a little bit of the fear of feeling fear.
So what is the process? I'm not asking you to give away the game because I want people to definitely hire you because I think you're great. But what would be your process for someone who comes to you, oh my gosh, I have a fear of losing money in trading. How do I help that? How do I remedy that? What would be your process to help them get over it? Not get over it, but get better.
Yeah, and actually, I don't mind giving away. I actually also just posted on my website kind of a quick guide to the mental game of trading. So, I prefer people get the book first so that if they were to work with me, we're kind of working from, kind of a similar perspective. It's far more efficient that way, certainly more cost effective for them. So the first thing you got to do is really get detailed descriptions of what's happening in real time. And for a lot of people, they have sort of like a surface level understanding, but as you pay attention to these sort of repetitive patterns or repetitive problems, you learn more details. And so we're looking at the specific thoughts you have at those times, what the situation is, how your body changes in terms of its feeling and, the actions that you take, the behaviors you have, changes in your market perception or changes in your perception of your own strategy. All of those things can be kind of captured in real time or sort of shortly thereafter. And if you do that on a regular basis, you are going to see patterns and level of detail that you didn't see before. One of the biggest issues that we face is that the emotional system has the power to shut down higher brain function. Higher brain functions include
Wow,
thinking.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
A lot of people don't know about it, and it's I think one of the most important kind of principles to understand. And frankly, there's actually therapists out there that don't understand it, which defies logic because a lot of therapeutic treatments require you to be aware, you to have the ability to think, plan, make decisions, but the emotional system has the power to compromise all that, and that part of the brain is also responsible for emotional control. And so if your emotions get too hot, it has the power to shut down the part of the brain responsible for controlling it. So you get into a spot where you actually are neurologically, physically incapable of controlling emotion because the emotions are that powerful. So we have to capture these early warning signs, right? And I've got lots of worksheets on my website. You can kind of learn how to scale your feel, learn how to scale your anger or greed so that you can see, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 5 is on average like the point where the emotions are really starting to compromise things. It's not like problems didn't exist before, but they tend to be minor enough that if you capture them, you can kind of maintain, kind of command, correct them, actually reduce the emotion. But if you don't see it until level 5 or 6, you're basically gambling with your emotional state at that point. And it's going to require a little bit of either luck in the market or luck for yourself that you're going to stand up and do something big and disruptive to kind of snap yourself out of it. So mapping your pattern of fear, of anger, of confidence, of discipline issues is really the only way you have a chance of kind of dealing with the kind of neurological realities that we face.
Wow, you just hit me like a ton of bricks. I never knew that, but it makes so much sense now. So, in your opinion, I think I already know your answer based off of our conversation. In your opinion, in the world of like trading psychology, do you think there needs to be more emphasis on trading psychology, and should it be considered an entire discipline? Because I don't know how familiar you are with trading, but like there's so many like trading courses where you can learn how to chart and, technical analysis and fundamental analysis, but you don't see an entire course dedicated to just trading psychology and getting people to understand there are mental hurdles that they most likely are going to face when trading, and entire course needs to be dedicated to that. Would you agree, or how do you feel about that?
So, good thing is the survey also touched upon this. Actually, I would say yes and no. So, no, we don't need to educate people on the importance of psychology, because 96% of people understand the value of psychology. Mm-hmm. They understand that emotions have the power to cause poor decision making. 91% can actually see in real time when anger and fear and confidence issues are affecting them. Mm. But here's the key. Only 34%, and this may even be a bit of people overconfident, only 34% have a strategy to be able to deal with it. Mm. So you've got a 57-point gap of people that don't know how to manage their emotions, how to deal with their emotions in a more pragmatic way. So you're absolutely right. There needs to be more from a system side, strategy side. And then that's, to me, that feels like where my contribution comes in, right? That if we look at, the Mark Douglases, the Brett Steenbargers, the Van Thorpes of the world, right? They have kind of moved the needle to make sure that people understand the value and the importance of psychology and being able to see emotions. That education has happened. What needs to happen now is for people to work through the problems. And that is what my book, kind of lays out in very, I think, precise terms, very pragmatic terms. It's very much of kind of a workbook. And like I said, there's worksheets that you can download to kind of utilize the book in more detailed ways. But that's really kind of what needs to happen. And I am thinking about, what my next steps are, right? I don't know if a video course is the right thing, because it would be kind of a mirror to what the trading book is doing. Right. But there is something. I agree with you. There's something from we need to get in the trenches together and develop strategies and develop processes so that you can actually, take that knowledge that you have, mm-hmm. right? Like it's kind of the G.I. Joe thing here, right? Knowing is half the power, half the battle. The other half is taking what you know and turning it into something that you can use. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I think my work comes in, and what the next steps need to be.
I agree. I definitely... your book, I've been telling people, like, as I was reading it, and then I just finished reading it recently, and I've been telling people, like, this is the best book I've ever read on trading psychology. It takes the cake for trading in the zone, because trading in the zone is like the Bible in terms of trading psychology for traders. I think this one's better. I think it's probably just because it's like it's newer, it's more refined, it's up to date, but this book, I'm telling you, like I've already had people like say, "Oh, I just bought the book. Oh, I'm about to buy the book. Oh, I'm about to literally in my DMs right now because I just finished reading the book." So your book is a game changer, really. I mean that sincerely for
I appreciate that.
The strategy, and I do think that I haven't been coached by you one-on-one, but I think that would probably be the best step for most people. Because like you said, most people are aware that they have some sort of emotional issue with trading, be it it's confidence, fear, anger, etc. They just don't know how to go about remedying that. So I think when most people go to therapy because they are dealing with, mental issues, I think they should go to you to help them with their trading.
I will say that, I mean, I only have so much time in a day, right? So the goal
Right.
of the book is really for it to be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it definitely is easier when you can hire me and say, like, I can
Help
be
me.
the one kind of reading the tea leaves and doing a lot of the work for you, but I think that's the thing is like, if you start working with the book and you've got a bunch of issues and you're not really sure where to start, that's okay, right? It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's not okay to use that feeling of being overwhelmed as an excuse not to work, right? Because like dumping out a 2,000 puzzle pieces on a table, right? If you don't feel overwhelmed by this big mountain of puzzle pieces, I mean, you're not human,
Yeah.
right? That's just it. But like, you just start beginning the process. And if you begin the process, then you actually can get to a point where things start to click into place, right? You find understanding and meaning that you didn't have before. You find awareness of what's going on for you that you didn't see before. And then the book lays out, right, the answers, right? So it just kind of takes working through it. But if you do so diligently and you start kind of day by day, there's no way that you can't make progress. I'm not saying that the book is going to solve every problem that you have, but there is no way that if you work with it, that you won't make some progress. How far you go is sort of TBD, but you just got to start it. And if you stay on the sidelines, kind of like a trade, or even just trading, right? You stay in the sim too long, right? You stay in the sidelines too long, you remove the ability to learn. And sometimes there is no other way than just diving in and seeing, kind of what you find.
Yeah, you got to do the work. You got to do the work on your part. Well, thank you so much, Jared, for this interview. This was I'm going to read your book again and again and again and again and again. I'm going to recommend it again and again and again and again. I think it's very, very valuable to traders, and I can't wait to see what you have next for us traders, because I want to see more.
Right. Well, thanks, Kayla. I appreciate it very much.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of the BlackGirlOption podcast. I hope you gained some insight and learned something new. Don't forget that episodes drop every first and third Monday of each month. So please hit the follow button and follow me on Instagram at BlackGirlOption. See you all on the next episode.